Hello everyone, thanks for joining. Today we're working on a 2017 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's a limited model. We're installing a rough country hidden winch, a rough country winch, the synthetic line, some off-road animal tow hooks. We'll be doing some other modifications. We got the lower grill with the proper cutouts. We got a license plate that flips up and some skid plates to go underneath. So let's get into it. Okay, so step one, you're going to remove the two clips underneath the fender here. Easiest thing to do is turn the wheels and then you can access them a little bit better. I'll bring you around to show you what I'm working on. Okay, so I got the wheel turned. And those should just pop out. So you got one clip there, one clip here. Okay, so some of them pop out and it's not fun. There's only 4, but yeah, 2 of them popped out like this. I had to grab each side with pliers. Kind of extend it out like that. And hopefully they're reusable. So on my Jeep, I had 2 10mm bolts in the fender well, and those are attached to the bumper. So it didn't say that in instruction manuals, but I did see that on another video. So in the fender well, you got the 2 retaining clips that we pulled out, and then also 2 10mm bolts. Okay, so step 1, we remove the pins. Step 2 is to kind of pull this out, starting from the bottom. Okay, so you don't have to go crazy. You just need to pull this out just enough so that the front bumper will pull out. There's a blue clip back here that's really hard to get out. It's not worth messing with in my mind. So if you just get these 4, you should be able to get the front bumper off. So we're gonna leave it just like that for now, and we'll see. Same thing on this side. Start at the bottom. So we got the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Step 3, we have 2 10mm bolts, one on each side. We got one here and one here. Next step, step 4, we have 2 push pins holding this grill in, so I'll pop those out. So you can see that's what it looks like when it pops out. Easiest way is to put a flathead in here, kind of get it started. So the next step is to remove the skid plate underneath the car. Okay, so we're going to take you underneath the car. That's the belly pan. And then that's the skid plate. So you got 1 bolt there, 1 bolt on the other side. What an angle. You got a pretty big bolt there, we're not touching that, but there's a bolt right here. Alright, so we got the skid plate out. This is the shape of it. As you can see, I was talking about these 2 front bolts. If you're not replacing that, you can just leave that up. It's got the 2 bolts in the back. You could leave those. The 2 in the front you need to take off because the splash guard that's right up in the front, that needs to come off, and those 2 bolts are holding that as well. So the next step, steps 6 through 8, if you're following the instructions, is to take out the splash guard. There's 2 side bolts, there's 2 in the front, and then the 2 in the back that are also attached to the skid plate. Your vehicle may not even have a skid plate. So there's a 10mm bolt. It's in the bottom of the wheel well. It's holding up the splash guard. If I come out, there's a splash guard. There's 2 bolts on the back side, and that's going to be your lower skid plate. And then you have the 2 10mm on the side. And on mine I had 3 bolts towards the front and 1 retaining pin. So the next step is there's 3 quarter turns holding the bottom of the front bumper. So I'm going to pull those out and show you how they work. But essentially just turn them, they drop right down. Okay, so the next step is to disconnect the fog lights if you can reach them, and then we're going to actually pull the front bumper off. Okay, so I got it off. I got to disconnect the fog lights now. What a beast. Okay, so we got the front bumper off. That was a project. We're going to get the ambient air temperature sensor off. So it's just right here. It's just held on by a clip. Then we're doing the air deflector and the air deflector. Next step, release the wiring harness. Pretty easy, just clipped right in. After that, we got these crossbars. We're going to release the lower bolts. So the instructions say 10 millimeter, mine was an 8 millimeter. It's really tight in there, so hopefully you have a ratchet. So yeah, like I said, it's really tight to get in there. If you have a wrench, the open end side does work, but if you got a ratchet, it really saves some time. So here's the other side. Now we can remove the top bolt holding the cross braces in. Second cross arm out. If you have tow hooks, this is where you're going to remove them now. I don't have tow hooks. I'm actually adding some in, so I can skip this step. The next step is to remove this front steel bumper or crash guard. There's 3 bolts on each side. So you got 13, 13, and 10. There you go, crash bar off. Okay, next step, remove the radiator support bolts. Now we can install the driver's side bracket. So we're going to tighten these, but don't tighten them all the way. You want to leave them a little bit loose because you got to get all the components into place. So we do the same thing over here. We're going to loosen these 2 bolts, take them out. So these bolts are really long and they have a blue Loctite, it looks like. It just makes them stubborn to get off. So you can install the passenger side now. Now it's time to actually put the winch plate. So that's why we left those loose, so you can kind of get everything into place. And as we start to tighten everything together, that's when we'll torque it down. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to mention is you want to put in these 2 13 millimeter bolts as well. So you have the radiator support, those are the really long ones. You obviously want to put these ones back in. And now these 4 bolts in here that are holding the winch plate together, we can torque those down. We're going to be using foot-pound torque wrench. We're going 45 foot-pounds. Obviously follow your instructions in case they change. So we're going to torque the OE hardware. My manual says 32 foot-pounds. So now if you have tow hooks, it's the time to install them. You would have to put these little bushings on to kind of extend them down. I ended up buying some off-road animal tow hooks. It includes everything you need and it has its own spacers to bring it down. Next step is the cross braces. Rough Country has new ones to use instead of the factory ones. Now you'll notice there's a little notch here, and then there's another notch here. So we're going into this, and then the factory 13 millimeters are here. So sorry I didn't show you the install of the winch. I got super frustrated when I was mounting on top and it wouldn't work. The holes weren't lining up. Then I realized, yeah, fits great on the bottom. So it's in place. I'll tighten everything and then start the wiring. So the manual states just to run it to this negative right here, which is the jump start terminal. So we'll undo that, put the negative there, and then the positive is up here. Again, there's a jump start post, so we're going to put it under that. So however you can run the wires, make sure they're secure, zip tied. Okay, so we're going to hook up the negative first. It's a 1/2 inch. It's kind of hard to get a socket in here, so I'm using a wrench. Okay, so the next step is to install this little bracket for the winch control. If you have a wireless winch, you don't have to do this step, but I have a wired winch. So instead of trying to get up in there to plug the winch controller in, I'm going to put this bracket here and we'll be able to plug in right here. Okay, so there's 2 holes right here. Trying to get the bolt behind there is going to be tricky. We're going to plug this into the winch. And then this will be through there. We'll drop this through here. So the winch is wired up. The next step is to test it, right? Before you zip tie and close it all up, we want to make sure it works. Nice, it works. So we'll get everything zip tied, secured, and then we'll start the reinstallation process. Next step is going to be to secure these wires and reconnect the ambient air temperature. So there's a hole right here. It'll just clip right into there. Okay, so if you're installing the tow hooks and you have the factory, these don't pop out. And so if you're feeling lucky, you could Dremel it out, you could cut it out. I found the piece with the cutouts for under 30 bucks online. So I ordered that. It's pretty easy to pop in. I recommend doing it from the underside. Basically you have all these little clips, and if you push down with a flathead, you can pull them out so you can see them all around. Okay, so the next step is to cut the fairlead into the bumper. And so if you have the license plate dimples, that helps out a lot. So I have the template all marked out. I'm just doing a quick test fit. The fairlead, I bought this extra thing. It's to hook it here instead of hooking it to your tow hook. And then a license plate bracket that'll kind of allow it to flip up and down. So just kind of lining everything up, making sure everything's good to go. Looks good, so we're going to drill it out. So the Dremel works really well. So now I'm just going to get a sander and just kind of sand these edges to make them a little bit more smooth. Okay, so if you're just installing this, you have these bolts. If you're installing the hook mount as well, they supply a little bit of longer bolts. Everything looks good. We'll tighten it up from the back side. Okay, so this is the bracket I was talking about. It flips up. You can hold it with a cotter pin here. Okay, so we're complete with the install of the winch. Now we're ready to start installing the bumper, making sure everything lines up. One thing I wanted to show you is, I was reading somewhere that Jeep's made it pretty easy to take off the lower part of this fender or the bumper if you're going off-roading for a weekend or something. So I'm going to show you that process. It's going to be a lot easier to show you here, like this. But basically, you know, you would take off that belly skirt, and then you'd be able to get up into here. There's a quarter turn here. There's another one over there. I'll zoom into it. Okay, so you can see it right here. It's just a quarter turn, and that's it. So you got one on this side, one on the other side, and then it just pulls off. So yeah, this lower bumper pulls off. If you're going off-roading, pretty heavy-duty stuff, this will give you a clearer angle to go over rocks and stuff. So I'm going to reinstall the bumper. It'll be a little easier with this off, and then this is pretty easy to snap back on once the bumper's in place. Okay, so we're going to put the bumper on now. If you were leaving the lower part on, you might want to hook up the fog lights. They're kind of a pain to get to from underneath, but whichever way you want to go. Essentially, we're following the instruction manual, steps 1 through 11 for the rough country hidden winch, just going in reverse order. So let's get the bumper on. So you can see now, without the lower bumper, there's a lot better clearance. So we have these 2 pop rivets in the top here, and then 2 bolts. Okay, so make sure the bumper is secure, popped in place, and we can pop this piece back into place. And if you remember, it was 2 rivets and then 1 10mm screw. So we'll get those in. So one of the benefits of not having the lower bumper on is I can just reach up behind here and get those pop rivets in place. They're never that great the second time around. They are holding, but I may end up replacing them. So yeah, same thing on the driver's side. We're gonna make sure the bumper is popped into place and then pop this fender piece in. So we got the front bumper on, hooked up the fog lights. I want to test them before I finish up everything else. So steps in reverse are now the lower bumper, the skid plate, and the belly skirt. So again, thanks for watching. Hopefully this video helps the next person install it. I appreciate the feedback and appreciate the likes and subscribes. Thanks a lot.